I'm looking good.
Next up, we have Quake 2, a game that was released on December 9, 1997 for PC and 1999 for the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1. The game was developed by id Software, who are very well known for creating such masterpieces like Doom, Wolfenstein 3D, and of course, Quake. As for the memories of this game, I remember buying it on Steam like in 2016. Dude, time flies very fast. I bought it and downloaded one of the better source ports for the game and played it for a few hours, and for some reason I forgot about it. Until now! Since the remaster version got released a while back and I played it again, it was much better than I thought. But why is that? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's start this review. When Quake was released, it gathered tons of positive reception around the world. Due to its amazing graphics for the time, its gameplay, while in my opinion not as perfect as say Duke Nukem 3D, it was still superb, unique, and very fast paced for the time. The sound department was excellent and then some. I mean, check it out on YouTube, it's freaking awesome. And who could forget the multiplayer aspect? This is where Quake and the series as a whole shines. The multiplayer was one of the most defining moments of the Quake franchise. Granted, the term deathmatch was used in other games prior to Quake, most notably Doom. However, Quake's deathmatch was the most influential, which made the gameplay of the first game unique due to many different ways the player could maneuver through the levels. For example, you could do bunny hopping for faster movement, rocket jumping, which became an iconic feature in Quake games competitive-wise. This made Quake 1 one of the first games singled out as some sort of electronic sport, or esports for short. With all that amazing success, what was id Software going to do next? Well, the answer was making another FPS game, of course, using the new game engine that John Carmack made, the id Tech 2. Originally, the new game wasn't going to be called Quake 2. In the early days of the development, it was supposed to be called Strog, or Lock and Load. But due to unfortunate failed attempts, the team decided to use the Quake name for the new game because probably they thought that using the Quake name on their new product would sell even more, and spoiler alert, it did sell well. So, did the game excel just like the previous games from id? Well, let's find out, shall we? The premise of Quake 2 goes like this. A Marine named Better Man takes part in a mission called Operation Alien Overlord, which is a desperate attempt to prevent an alien invasion of Earth. These aliens, known as Strogs, live in their own home planet, the Strog. The Marines try to invade their home planet, but in the end, they either get killed or captured. Our protagonist, Better Man, crashes in the landing zone, and he needs to fight his way through the Strog world and defeat the leader once and for all. Let's start our Strog hunt with the weapon roster. The weapon roster in Quake 2 is, put it bluntly, futuristic. You still have your shotgun, super shotgun, the machine gun, chain gun, grenade launcher, and rocket launcher, you know, the usual stuff from id Software. However, there are some changes with the transition from Quake 1 to Quake 2. The axe from the first game was replaced by a blaster pistol, which is fine until you pick a shotgun and then it becomes obsolete. The nail gun and the super nail gun were changed to the machine gun and the chain gun respectively in the second game, but they functioned as the same as their respective counterparts. But the chain gun, while powerful, could shoot ammo like no one's business. In addition to this, we also have new toys to play in this game. We have the Hyper Blaster, which functions similar to Doom's plasma rifle, the sequel to one of the most iconic weapons of all time, the BFG-10K, actually works similar to its predecessor, the BFG-9000. The 10K shoots a big green plasma ball that when it hits a wall, it will kill any enemy that is within the range. However, there is a new addition, and that's when the big green ball travels around the arena, it shoots green beams that kills any enemy near it. It's generally useful to use it against hordes of enemies, but it's more suitable for bosses. And last but not least, we have the one and only, the Railgun. It's easily a deathmatch player's wet dream. It's very powerful in its own right, as it shoots a hit scan laser that strikes the target immediately with no distant penalties whatsoever. Not to mention it can drill its way through multiple enemies, which is pretty neat. One nice addition is that it deals twice the amount of damage to unnoticed enemies, which is pretty cool. Yes, we know that Shadow Warrior had the railgun before Quake 2, but here it's much better. The weapon rust in Quake 2 is effective, and design-wise they look cool and very futuristic, befitting the game's theme. Speaking of roster, let's talk about the enemy roster, starting off the guards. These low tier enemies are pretty easy to deal with, however there are 3 versions of these guards. The light guards have a blaster and they are the weakest. The shotgun and the machine guard are much more dangerous, but they are ammo fodder once you get bigger weapons in the game. Keep in mind that even if you kill them, sometimes they can still attack you, so be careful. The enforcers, no, not the enforcer, this one. It functions similar to Duke 3D's enforcer, but he is much more lethal. He shoots hit-scan bullets at you, but you can exploit him since he must reload his weapon before firing, giving you enough time to take cover and shoot again. They are bulkier compared to the guards, but a point-blank super shotgun or a shot for a railgun can dispatch them pretty quickly. But if you thought that the enforcers were bad, that's nothing compared to the gunners, who are even more dangerous than the enforcers. Like, they do also have a hit-scan weapon, but they shoot a shit ton of grenades that can fuck you over. Your best bet is take cover or just use the chain gun to toast them. The berserkers are melee jerks that are not that dangerous, as a few shots from a super shotgun can blow them out. The parasite is a weird enemy. It's a mutated mechanical dog with a human head that instead of biting you, they are equipped with the organic tube that can attach to the player and drain its life. If you ever encounter these weirdos, you better make sure you focus on them first. Trust me on this, you're gonna have a bad time if you don't focus on them first. The Gladiator is a force to be reckoned with, mostly because he is equipped with a freaking railgun. What, you thought you were the only person with a railgun? Come on now, these Strugs are no pushovers by any means. Anyways, the Gladiator railgun damage is high if you act like a sitting duck, so player movement and strafing is the key to deal with the Strug of a bitch. Oh, it can also melee attack you too. The medic, gee I wish, is pretty dangerous. Imagine the Archvile from Doom, but add a little bit of Strog sprinkles into it and you get this. TLDR, the medic can revive fallen Strugs, so you need to focus the medic first, otherwise you're gonna have a bad time. Brains are these creepy idiots that are equipped with energy armor, making them bulkier. They have 2 ways of attacking, either the tentacles, which is followed by its hook attack. It's not that threatening if you know what you're doing, just stay out of its melee range and you'll be fine. Oh, on a side note, is it just me or do the brains look like a creepier and beefier version of a Wally? No seriously, the resemblance is uncanny as fuck. The Tacticians and the Flyers are not that dangerous, but Icarus is a little bit more dangerous, but it's very easy to kill. The Hyper Blaster is a great weapon to make them bite the dust. And we have the Tank, which is literally a freaking tank. Duh! It's easily the strongest enemy in the game, as it can hit scan you, shoot 3 blasts at you, and worst of all, it can shoot 3 rockets at you, which can deal a huge amount of damage at you if you're not prepared. Fortunately, he is very slow, and all his attacks are telegraphed, giving you a lot of time to dodge his attacks. However, later, you come across the tank commanders who are even more dangerous than the regular tanks. The mutants are very easy to deal with, as any weapon that isn't a blaster can wipe them off. Then we have the Iron Maiden. Funny how I thought I didn't get sued by the rock band of the same name. Lucky them. So the Iron Maiden is also another easy enemy to deal with. Granted, her rockets can be quite powerful, but she is so slow that her potential is irrelevant, and 2 railgun shots can put her down. Much like other FPS games at the time, Quake 2 also has bosses, which it did better than its predecessor. They're not that dangerous, but the final boss Macron is pretty dangerous since it has 2 forms. The first one being his exoskeleton robot, Jark, and Din himself. He has a railgun, a blaster, and worst of all, he can fire a BFG-10K blast that can harm the player big time. However, if you have a quad damage power-up or the invincibility, then it becomes total cheese. As for the power-ups, they do return in Quake 2, and while they function similar to Quake 1, they no longer activate when you pick them up. Instead, you have to select them and use them, which makes the game kind of strategic. For example, if you pick the quad damage, you don't need to use it now, you can save it for the bosses. And there's new power-ups in the game, like the Silencer, which silences the sound effects of your weapons, Adrenaline restores your health to the max, and also increasing the player's maximum health by 1, Ammo packs and bandolier increase your maximum ammo capacity, making your adventure easier, and even a rebreather which allows you to breathe underwater without taking damage. So how's the gameplay? Perfect. Simply perfect. The player movement is so damn good, and the weapons are powerful, so powerful that sometimes you can chip enemies. And what about the level design? Well, this is where Quake 2 separates from its other competitors. See, in any FPS game, you progress the game through levels to levels. In Quake 2, however, the levels are grouped into units. The levels themselves are interconnected, and the progression through the unit can develop in non-linear fashion, making very unique at the time when Quake 2 was released. And few games like Iron Fury also has that feature since its levels were interconnected. So, are these levels any good? Well, they are pretty well designed and dare I say better than the Quake 1 levels. The levels in Quake 1 had a medieval/Lovecraftian theme around it, but Quake 2 had a more futuristic military theme to it, which in my opinion I found Quake 2's level theme to be my favorite of the series. I don't know, I found games that take place in futuristic places or in space to be more appealing to me, and they can pack a lot of charm to it. That's not to say Quake 1's levels were awful, far from it, but I still think its sequel had a much better level design, but that's just me. Quake 1 levels were claustrophobic and creepier, while Quake's 2 levels were far more open, complex, and more atmospheric. But at the end of the day, both are great in different ways. Quake's 2 levels, or units for that matter, take place in factories, mines, a palace, and you even go to space to fight the final boss. Quake's 2 difficulty for the most part is not that hard. Originally the game had 3 difficulty levels, however there was a hidden difficulty skill known as Hard Plus that was only accessed by using the console commands. However, source ports as well as the 2003 remastered version, which we'll talk about later, have this skill at the start of the game. Hard Plus, otherwise known as Nightmare Mode, works similar to Quake 1's Nightmare Mode, as in it makes the enemy attacks faster and never flinch when shot, making them more dangerous. I played this game on Nightmare and it was very challenging, especially in the later levels, so you need to play safe when you play this skill because if you make one mistake, it's mostly your fault. When I first played on Nightmare Mode, it gave me a tough but fair challenge for the most part, and then I played on Hard and it was much more forgiving, and the leap between Hard and Nightmare Mode in terms of brutality is significant. Quake 2 has expansions as well, and there are 2 of them, The Reckoning and Ground Zero. The Reckoning was developed by Xatrix, who are very well known for making Redneck Rampage and Kingpin Life of Crime. The expansion follows Joker, who is on a mission to infiltrate the moon base and destroy the forces of Strogg. The expansion has new units, but it also packs new weapons and enemies. For example, the Iron Ripper basically shoots energy boomerangs that can ricochet, allowing to kill out-of-sight enemies, which is pretty cool. The Phalanx Particle Cannon, which fires 2 projectiles and is very powerful against high-tier enemies. The mission pack also has an expansive enemy roster, but it's mostly upgraded enemies from the base game. As for the difficulty, it's much harder than the base game, but not boring and unfair, and the level design isn't half bad either. So good job, Xatrix. Then we have the other mission pack named Ground Zero, which was developed by Rogue Entertainment, who are famous for making Stripe, which was a game running under the Doom engine, and American McGee Alice as well. Oh, they also made the Dissolution of Eternity expansion pack for Quake 1 as well. The premise goes like this: the gravity well has trapped the Earth fleet in orbit above the planet, and you need to make your way to the gravity well and destroy it. Like the previous expansion pack, The Reckoning, Ground Zero also has new weapons and new enemies. For example, we have the ATF rifle, which functions like a budget hyper blaster, a plasma beam cannon, which is a more powerful version of the hyper blaster, a proximity mine launcher, and even a fucking chainsaw, which kinda sucks. Then we have new enemies, but much like The Reckoning, most of them are upgraded versions of the base game. But we also have 2 new enemies, the turrets, which are fucking everywhere, and the stalkers, which are these mechanical spiders that can cling to ceilings and they can fire energy blasts. Not to mention they can play dead, so jib in when you have the chance. Another thing that Ground Zero does is, unlike The Reckoning, there have been some changes in the gameplay department, most notably on the enemy's AI. Some enemies like the Enforcer will attack more quickly, The gunner attacks more often, and even the medics revive fallen enemies more quickly. On top of that, the enemies will sometimes try to dodge the player's projectiles, making them more dangerous. Difficulty-wise, it gets brutal, especially in the later levels when playing on Nightmare mode, since death lurks around every corner and it becomes a sadistic nightmare to get through in the last levels, and the boss is one of the most challenging foes in the entire game. Her first form is not that hard, but her final form is fucking brutal. She summons stalkers to annoy you, she fires black balls of energy that can follow you, which is very hard to dodge, and she also fires a yellow powerful beam that deals heavy damage. If you face her, you better make sure your experience of 4,000 years of FPS skills are on point. As for the level design, it's not bad, but it's not as good as the Reckoning and the base Quake 2 campaign. There were also 2 other expansions that will be released, Unseen and Vengeance, however, they were never released unfortunately. Quake 2 also got some console ports, the N64 and the PS1, and they were released in 1999, 2 years after the PC release. The N64 version was developed by Midway Games, who are very well known for the creation of Mortal Kombat as well as Doom 64. The N64 version is more of an abridged version of the PC port. It doesn't have the complex level design that the PC version has, its levels are simplified, and are very different compared to the PC version. It has most of the enemy roster, but the Technician, Reigns, Barracuda Shark, Medic, Jorg, and even the Macron do not make an appearance in the N64 version due to cartridge limitations. The power-ups also work like in Quake 1, where if you pick the power-up, you instantly take the effect of the power-up. The graphics for the N64 port are decent, but the weapons animations are very choppy, which is very distracting, not to mention that the textures look much blurrier than the PC version. The port also has a lot of framing issues that can ruin the experience of the game. The N64 version also supports 4-player mode split-screen multiplayer, which was pretty good at the time. The soundtrack of this game is different from the PC version. Whereas the PC version had Sonic Mayhem as the composer of the game, the soundtrack of the N64 version was composed by Audrey Hodges, who also composed the soundtrack of Doom 64 and the N64 port of Quake. The soundtrack has an industrial and ambient aesthetic, which is very different to the heavy metal soundtrack that the PC version offers. The PS1 version was handed to Hammerhead, who were responsible for Shadowmaster, a fantasy shooter that was released for the PS1 in 1997. In terms of content, the PS1 version has some levels from the PC version, but they are modified due to console limitations. Also, one advantage that the PS1 has over the N64 version is that in the N64 version, you would progress the game through levels to levels like you would do in any other FPS game. In the PS1 version, it has the levels interconnected through a unit, much like the PC version. The port has 5 units, or missions in this case, and the story largely follows the same path as in the PC version. As for the enemy roster, it has 2 enemies, the Arknit and the Guardian, and unlike the N64, it has the entire enemy roster from the PC version. While the N64 port ran at a resolution of 320 by 240 or 320 by 256 in the PAL regions, the PS1 ran at a resolution of 512 by 240 or 512 by 256 in the PAL regions. This resolution was used in some games like Tekken 2, Crash Bandicoot, and even the Spyro trilogy. Also, the port seems to be more stable frame rate wise, and only drops when there's too many enemies in an area. When overclocked using the dock station, it runs at a stable 30 FPS. Graphics wise, the color lighting is carried over from the PC version, but unlike the N64 version, it has no skybox support. However, it also adds lens flare to light sources, which makes the PS1 version more appealing than the N64 in my opinion. Not too shabby for a PS1 title. Like the N64 version, this port also has split-screen multiplayer, but in order to play with 4 players, you need a multi-tap accessory for the PlayStation. When it comes to controls, the game supports both the sticks from the DualShock controller, which was a big deal for the time, but nowadays it's hard to play with the outdated controls of this console port. The soundtrack is taken from the PC version, so there isn't much else to talk about in the sound department, so let's just move on. While these console ports didn't age well with the passage of time, back then, it was very unreal and impressive to see the game running decent on consoles that were released from 1994 to 1996. The id Tech 2 was a very demanding engine, and Salvo, Midway, and Hammerhead managed to make it work on these two consoles, which was insane. But keep in mind, back in 1999, not many people, including me, didn't have a high-end PC, let alone even a fucking low-tier PC. So the console versions were the cheapest ways to experience Quake 2, and in that part, they delivered with big colors. On December 22, 2001, id Software released the source code for Quake 2, and much like Quake 1, Quake 2 also had source ports like Iki Quake 2 and Yamagi Quake 2, and these were the best ways to play Quake 2 back then on modern machines. However, on August 10, 2023, NightDive released the remastered version of Quake 2, and once again, NightDive Studios outdone themselves this time around. The remastered version offers a lot of things. It offers both the original expansion packs, and even Quake 2 64 has been ported over, and it's 10 times better than it was in the X64 version due to higher resolutions and frame rates with modern controls. Oh, it has a new episode called Call of the Machine, and the episode was created by Machine Games, who also worked on Quake 1 new episodes Dimension of the Machine, as well as Legacy of Rust on the recent NightDive version of Doom. And I gotta say, it's easily the best episode in Quake 2, even beating the base skin campaign in terms of level design. It's really superb. It even has some Quake 1 and Plutonium references, the former being that has a level that has a boss arena that resembles the House of Gaton, except that there's a Chambler instead of the Gaton, and the former is a secret level that is called the Casali effect, which is definitely a Plutonium reference since the Casali brothers were involved in that Doom WAD, and the secret level is packed to the raid with the most lethal enemies that can toast you unless you have a good power-up. And it doesn't end there. NightDive also went on extra mile by tweaking some gameplay elements like improved AI from Ground Zero expansion pack, enemy moves that were cut in the final game but restored in the remastered version, AI enhancements from Ground Zero are now present in all episodes of the game, the machine gun doesn't recoil that much compared to the vanilla version of Quake 2, a complex that directs you to the next objective, improved graphics and models, cross-play support so you can play with PS4, PS5, Xbox and even Switch players online, and even freaking 4-player split screen local multiplayer just like the old good times? Are you kidding me? And you can even explore concept art and even gameplay footage of Quake 2, including early versions of weapons, items, and you can even play levels from the game's original development, which is very cool if you ask me. I honestly love this remaster, so much so that I got all the achievements. It's easily the definitive way to play Quake 2, and it's a wonderful remaster that fixes little issues that the vanilla version had and then some. As I mentioned before, Quake 2 runs under id Tech 2, which powered a lot of games like Heretic 2, Sin, Kingpin, and this weird game. By 1997, Quake 2 blew us away with its amazing graphics, and id Software didn't disappoint us. The game supported OpenGL out of the box, which was amazing for those who had a Voodoo card on their PCs, and sure, the game also had software rendering, but it was much more demanding, especially on higher resolutions. Aesthetic-wise, it felt very futuristic, and it was much more detailed than Quake 1. Make no mistake though, Quake 1 still looks great to this day, but I find Quake's 2 graphics and its atmosphere more appealing than its predecessor. The atmosphere was much more realistic and vibrant, and the attention to detail was top-notch. Like I said before, you could turn your enemies into gibs, and it was very pleasing to see at the time. Oh, I almost forgot about another thing. The enemies get visually damaged as you attack them, which actually looks like they are going to die when they're about to die, and that's something that Quake 2 had that other games prior to it didn't have. This is what we call amazing feedback to the player. The remastered version also enhances the graphics. It enhances the lighting alongside with updated weapon and enemy models, dynamic shadows and lighting that the vanilla version didn't have, and even glow maps that make certain objects more palatable. Granted, you could turn these enhancements off in the options menu, though you can't alter the gameplay settings. Now, you guys might be wondering, what about the Steam Deck? Does it work? The answer is, yeah, it works flawlessly. Granted, playing Quake 2 with the controller isn't the best way to play it, but it's still miles better than playing on the original consoles, and who doesn't like playing Quake 2 on the go? Quake 2 soundtracks is perfect, simply perfect. Unlike in Quake 1, where the soundtrack was composed by Trent Reznor, this time around Quake 2's soundtrack was composed by the talented Sasha Dekian, otherwise known professionally as Sonic Mayhem, who composed soundtracks on a lot of games like Unreal, Unreal Tournament, Quake 3 Arena, and Prototype. Compared to Quake 1's soundtrack, where it was creepy and atmospheric, Quake 2's soundtrack packed a lot of fucking metal and adrenaline, and I really love it. It really motivates me beating the fuck out of the strokes of bitches and then some. What about the sound effects? They pack a huge excellent punch. The super shotgun sound effect is a stealth of legends, and so are most of the weapons in the game. But what really shines when it comes to the sound effects was the enemies. They sounded menacing, creepy, and they scared the shit out of me when I played this game back like 7 years ago. It really enhances the environment that Quake 2 creates, and it really shows how much effort the team put in the sound department. Great job, id Software! If you ask me which one I would prefer Quake 2 music over Quake 1. Don't get me wrong, both are amazing in their own right, I just prefer Quake 2 music because it's metal as fuck. So how great was Quake 2 actually? Well, it's one hell of a game. Time and time again, Quake 2 shows us what makes a great game, but also it improves upon the original Quake in some ways, most notably its weapon and enemy roster and its gunplay. The NightDive version improved upon the vanilla version of the game with a lot of changes here and there, fixing the little issues that the original version had, making the remaster version, in my opinion, the definitive way to play Quake 2. Despite facing some competition against other contenders like Half-Life and Unreal, Quake's 2 gameplay was, and still to this day, pretty good and fast-paced. And you know what's messed up is that while the first Quake game was very remembered by a lot of people, Quake 2 wasn't remembered that much compared to Quake 1, and I don't know why. I mean, it does things that Quake 1 wish it had, most notably a more menacing enemy roster, the way how the levels themselves interact with each other and they were interconnected, as well as a better soundtrack than Quake 1. Granted, some people say that the sequel didn't change that much compared to its predecessor, but in my opinion, I think the game adds more things that its predecessor didn't have. You can buy this game on Steam for 10 euros, or if you bought the original version before the NightDive version was announced, you can get the remastered version for free. Overall, Quake 2 is not only the most overlooked game, but also one of the greatest games of all time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and if you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. And I want to know what you guys think about Quake 2. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below, and that's all folks, see you next time.